Okay, and this is how welcome. Wow, loads of people. Okay, so this year is called um, Journey to the Selfless Self. It's a series of classes that I created a couple of years back, and it's really, to be honest, it's basically Tanya kind of with everything extracted from it, taken out of all of the complicated mystical language and just kind of presented in a very 2020, I mean, I did it in 2021, but I suppose it's kind of up to date still in a very 2023 kind of way that will hopefully be very, it's going to be very deep. It's going to be challenging. We're going to have to look into ourselves quite deeply and ask some questions, and hopefully very practical. It's going to help us in our relationship with ourselves, as well as Hashem, in our relationship with others, and with our relationship with Hashem. It's really all the same thing. Okay. Anybody know? Anyone's had any experience with Tanya Bichlal? Anyone knows anything about the Sefer whatsoever? And people can.
Very little,
Okay, this is
very little.
it's going to be kind of interactive, so you can keep in depending on the noise in the background. But I'm going to be asking for everybody to give their 2 cents as well. So you don't have to have your cameras on, that's fine. But if you want, that's great. And but just be prepared to contribute. Okay, so there's everyone's after inspiration, yeah. Everybody wants to be inspired in their Yiddishkeit. So this isn't about inspiration. This is a much higher thing we're aiming for, because as everybody knows, inspiration, as quickly as it comes, it basically just goes again. So you can be sitting in an inspiring shir, feel very inspired, maybe even get home and for the next hour also feel inspired, but then definitely by the next morning it's, so there's a deeper level of inspiration, or not inspiration, there's a deeper level of chizuk, which is called yediyah, understanding things really clearly. So we use this usually in a very negative way. So like, for example, when we start going in on a very down, like negative kind of thinking path on ourselves, the deeper in we go, and the more we think about how useless we are and how all the horrible thoughts we think about ourselves, yeah, the deeper we go into these ideas, the more kind of hopeless life feels, the more it just keeps getting worse and worse. Yeah, that's the idea on the bad side of knowing something deeply. You don't really know it, but you're thinking into it, you're meditating on it, and it's just going down and down. And the more you prove how useless you are, the more useless you feel, and then that makes more useless thoughts, and it just goes down and down. So what our goal is to go the opposite way, and to start replacing these thoughts with understanding, deep understandings that are very enlightening, that will help us keep going up and up and up. So it's the difference really between a vegetable and a tree. So with the vegetable, I'm not a farmer, but from what I know about vegetables, is that when you plant a carrot, for example, the carrot grows, you take out the carrot, you eat it, and then you have to plant a new carrot. Okay, that's comparable to inspiration. As long as that inspiring rabbi is around, or as long as that inspiring friend is around, or as long as that, nice song is on the radio, then you're feeling up. The minute it goes away, then you're back down again. So that's exactly like a vegetable. The other option is like a tree. A tree keeps putting out fruits, It never stops giving fruits. So that's exactly the idea that we're trying to, that's where we're going with this, is to get ideas, some very clear foundational ideas that will act as a tree inside us, that will constantly be giving us that chizuk that we need in our avodas Hashem. Okay, so I don't know where people are holding, so I'm gonna speak how I usually speak. If there's any Hebrew words or whatever that I use that people don't know, please don't just not say anything. Please catch me and I'll translate because I really don't know where people are holding with the words. So okay. So what I'm really giving over, like I said, I'm trying to give over the Tanya in this really distilled, approachable kind of way and give over all these exceptional, enlightened ideas that in a very relevant and I hope understandable way. What the Tanya is, standing on one leg, is a very very small book. In fact, it's so small I carry it in my pocket. That's basically it. Yeah. That the Alter Rebbe of Lubavitch, or Shneur Zalman of Ladi, he wrote it down, so to speak. The wisdom in this book is just, I mean, I've spent thousands of hours learning this book, and it's mind-boggling. The more time I spend on it, the more it becomes like impossible in my mind that it got written by a human being. I really mean that. I'm not just saying that like in a kind of poetic way. It's just it's so holographic, it's so applicable, it's so profound, it's so relevant, everything. So what's very important to remember though is that there was a very consistent chain from the Alter Rebbe down through until like the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, and then there was a rabbi called Rav Yoel Khan who taught my Rebbe who's called Rav Manis Friedman. Some of you I'm sure know of him. And that's where I learned all of this from Rav Manis Friedman. So we actually have a chain, because once we get back to the Alter Rebbe, then he was a student of the Maggid of Mezrich, who was a student of the Baal Shem Tov. And as the legend goes, the Baal Shem Tov, anyone knows who the Baal Shem Tov's Rebbe was? So the legend goes that the Baal Shem Tov's Rebbe was a man called Achia Shaloni. He was the prophet in the time of Shmuel and David and Eliyahu. So work out how that, I don't know how that works out, if it was on an neshama level or something, but it was about 2,800 years before the Baal Shem Tov. But Achia Shaloni was a very exceptional character in Nach, because it said that he lived for many years. I worked it out one time. It had to be that he lived for about between 600 and 900 years or something like that. And he was of the Rambam says he was of the Yotzei Mitzrayim. Okay, he left Egypt, and it says that he listened to Moshe Rabbeinu. He heard Moshe Rabbeinu, and he went all the way through till the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. So if you think about what we say in Dayenu when we sing on Pesach night, Dayenu, the song begins with "He took us out of Egypt," and it ends with the building of the Beis Hamikdash. So Achia Shaloni was the one man, because he lived so long, that saw the whole process of Dayenu. He saw the whole thing. So basically, by saying that the Baal Shem Tov learned from him, what we're really doing, and this is very important, is we're kind of like, you know, the elevators in Manhattan that skip like from the 30th floor to like the 70th floor. That's really what we're doing with what we're learning when we learn the Tanya. We're actually skipping back from the Baal Shem Tov through to Achia Shaloni, who heard words from Moshe Rabbeinu, who heard the words from Hashem himself. And that's called Torah Sheba'al Peh. And that's really, it sounds very like, you know, mystical and cool, but it really is exactly how that works. That means that there's the information carries the Rebbeinu Shloim himself, and it's coming straight down through these words. These words become like kalim, vessels that contain meaning. Just like when you talk to somebody, you're contained in the words, your feelings, your emotions, things that you understand are contained within the words. In the Torah, contained within the words, if they're given over with a pure heart, is Hashem himself, believe it or not. More even in the concepts. So these concepts that we're going to be learning actually contain the Rebbeinu Shloim. We'll get clear on that, B'ezrat Hashem, what that really means. Okay, so we're going to discuss the on the agenda over the next few weeks, if people want to carry on coming. we're going to answer a bunch of questions. Okay, the first most important question that this class is dedicated to is getting an understanding of what it means good and evil. Then we're going to understand what a human being is. We're going to understand, B'ezrat Hashem, what a Jew is. We're going to understand what it means when we say Hashem is one. We're going to understand what is Torah and mitzvahs. We're going to understand what is free will, Mesiras Nefesh, self-sacrifice, and tshuva. And we're going to try and work out also the purpose of creation. So these are big, important questions that are not simple questions, but they're questions that can be understood by us, B'ezrat Hashem, and we will understand them, B'ezrat Hashem. Just before we begin, this is quite an important point. It'll take a few minutes to explain. The concept of a moshel. Everyone knows what a moshel is? Yeah? So a moshel, or in English, an analogy, is a means by which we convey an idea that's maybe unrelatable or too big to somebody else so somebody else can relate to it and understand it. But there's two ways that mashalim go in the Torah. There's mashalim that we learn from Hashem to us, and then there's mashalim that we learn from us to Hashem. And it's important to get the direction correct. So, for example, there's this profound cosmic truth or cosmic system that Hashem used to create creation. There's two ways of giving to something. There's what's called giving on a level of face-to-face and giving on a level called back-to-back. So what does that mean? So giving on a level of face-to-face is when the other person is an end unto themselves. So when we're relating to our children, we don't want anything, well, hopefully we don't want anything from our children. It's about them. Every interaction we should have with our children should be about them. I know we're not perfect, so it's not always, but that's what it should be. Yeah, that's called a face-to-face relationship. A back-to-back relationship means it's not about the other person. Really, it's about me. So a great example of a back-to-back relationship would be the relationship that you have with a cab driver. Okay, he doesn't care about you. He just cares, I'm going to be, maybe he's a nice guy, but Lamaisa, he doesn't care about you. He cares about your money. And you don't care about him. You care about getting to where you need to get to. That's called a back-to-back relationship. So there's two kinds of creations. There's creations that Hashem made face-to-face, that they are an end unto themselves. That's why he made creation. And then there's creations that he made, he didn't really want to make them, but he made them as a means to an end. So the whole concept of Ra, of evil, he doesn't want evil for itself. He wants evil so that we can have the ability to choose good. Because if we didn't have evil, if there was no kind of evil in the world, then there would be no ability to choose Tov. So us choosing Tov, that's an end unto itself. But his relationship to evil is a back-to-back relationship. It's a kind of transactional relationship. And this is what the point now is what I want to bring out. So this is, everyone hears this is like a big cosmic way. If you read, if you learn in Kabbalah, it's all talking about face-to-face and back-to-back, and there's also back to front and front to back, and there's all these, and it's very complicated and esoteric and mystical and etc. But one of the things that we learn is that when somebody's in a back-to-back relationship with someone, well, you're only in the cab for a minute, so it doesn't really matter. But if you're in a relationship with someone and they become a means to an end, then let me say it backwards. The way it works with Hashem in this world, the reason why Ra is getting more Ra is because his relationship to Ra is a back-to-back relationship. And that back-to-back relationship causes a rebellion from the one who's receiving. Because he's not receiving from your inner essence, he's receiving from an external part of you. And he senses that on a subconscious level, whatever it is. And the evil starts to rebel and gets worse and worse. Now that's the cosmic reality. Bringing that down into our life, if we're treating our children, if we're with our children on a back-to-back basis, that will cause a rebellion from our children. Our children will want to make distance from us. If our children aren't an end unto themselves, and we're treating them as a means to some kind of selfish end, then what that will cause is them trying to create a distance from us. So that's a very deep idea, but that's just the idea of a moshel that exists on like a cosmic level, that in our life is on a very, very practical, just very immediate and practical level. Okay, and there's mashalim that go the other way as well, but we just wanted to start off by explaining that we're going to be learning from moshel this way to this way. Like for example, we hear that Hashem gets angry, yeah, over and over in the Chumash. It talks about Hashem getting angry. So really, in our mind, in our heart of hearts, we're thinking that's really ridiculous. How can he get angry? But when we understand that the moshel of anger is going, his anger is true anger, and our anger is the petty anger, now we've got something to work with. Now we can understand what anger actually is. But when we're thinking about our anger and we're putting it on him, we just think of him as this petty, irate old man. And we're like, what's with you, God? Pull it together. But that's because we're going the wrong way. The same idea as with a hand. Yeah, we say that Hashem has an arm. And we say we have an arm. And then we say, no, he doesn't really have an arm. But the truth is, he really has an arm. This is just a representation of a real arm. His arm isn't made of, his arm doesn't have any physicality to it in any way. But a real arm can split a sea and can destroy, a nation. Our arm is just a representation of what a real arm actually is. Once you've got it straight, then everything starts to make a lot of sense. You'll see. Okay. So the question is, I want everyone to try and give me an answer to this. Do we have a definition for good and evil? Tov and Ra? Can anyone think of a definition throughout a definition?
Tov is following the Torah, following Hashem.
Okay.
I don't know about, and I guess Ra is not.
So there can only be Tov and Ra when there's the Torah? Somebody who doesn't believe in God can't be good?
Tov is a face-to-face relationship with something, and Ra is a back-to-back.
Well, that's very deep. Okay. Anyone else want to throw out? Because it's interesting, because I've asked this question to so many people, and the reaction's nearly all the same, and I see it by you guys as well, is usually like, people, their eyes kind of go, they're like, people like smile, and they're like, of course I can give you a definition for Tov and Ra, good and evil. And then after about a few seconds, their eyes like kind of go upwards, and they're like, actually, that's not so straightforward. And it's quite embarrassing. People actually get embarrassed by it. And I've asked big Talmidei Chachamim as well, who actually also give me the same answer, or they patchki around, and they don't like. It's amazing how people don't have people don't have an actual working definition of good and evil. So I'll just I typed into the chatbot GPT just now. Yeah, what is the definition?
Reb Shmuel,
yeah.
Could it be perceived good, what we perceive as good? Because I was originally going to say Ratzon Hashem, but Ra is also Ratzon Hashem. So could it be what we perceive?
So, I mean, there's a lot of people who don't believe in God, Bichlal, who believe very much in the concept of good and evil. So when we plug it into Torah, that's nice, and it might even be true. But everyone knows like what happened 2 weeks ago in Eretz Yisrael was Ra. Everyone. There's no discussion there. You don't need 1 second, whatever that is. Okay. You don't need the Torah to tell you that what happened in Eretz Yisrael just now was Ra. So it has to be something more to say foundational than toiva is not the right thing to say, but it has to be something more universal, like more kind of natural, like baked into the system. You with me? So listen to what the chatbot said, yeah? Chatbot says, what is the definition of good and evil? It said, the definitions of good and evil are complex and can vary depending on one's philosophical, cultural, religious and ethical perspectives. Then it gave a whole bunch of different ways of understanding it that were very convoluted. And then it said at the end, it's important to note that the definitions of good and evil can be highly subjective and context dependent. And there is often significant debate and diversity of opinion regarding what actions and behaviors fall into each category. Additionally, the definitions of good and evil can evolve over time as societies and cultures change and as our understandings of ethics and morality deepens. So you walk away from that and you're like, well, maybe there isn't such a thing as good and evil. I don't know what that means. He just basically said, it's very complex and it varies depending on et cetera, et cetera. But I'm going to prove that that's not the case. Look, has everyone got a pen and paper? Come on, just grab a scrap of paper and a pen. Okay. And we're going to write down 6 names. Okay. 6 personalities. Random personalities. I'm going to give you a little, like just a 10-second definition of who that person is. And you've heard of all these people anyway, but I'm just going to say, and we're going to order these names in good to evil. But first, just write the names down. Okay, the first name is Robin Hood. Yeah, he was a mythical bandit who stole from the rich to give to the poor. Okay, then we've got Ted Bundy, who was a convicted serial killer who raped and murdered hundreds, maybe, of women from children from 12 years old to whatever. Yeah. Then we've got Mother Teresa, who there is a little bit of controversy about her, but I just want to focus on the fact that she ran a chain of hospices called House of the Dying for people in India who were dying, and she just sat with these people with no money and just helped as much as she possibly could. Then you have Adolf Hitler. Don't need to say anything about him. Much money. Then we have Bill Gates. I wrote this a couple of years ago. I'd probably change that for somebody else. No, Bill Gates is still there. And then we have Bernie Madoff. Everyone knows who Bernie Madoff is? Yeah. So just to put it in perspective, Bernie Madoff ended up stealing billions of dollars. There were like hundreds, maybe thousands of people whose entire life savings literally just like didn't exist one day. They'd been saving for years and years and years, and then all of a sudden they had nothing. Okay, so we've got the list of these personalities. Yeah, we've got Robin Hood, Ted Bundy, Mother Teresa, Adolf Hitler, Bill Gates, Bernie Madoff. So can we take just a moment out? And I want us to write a list of these 6 people, to order them from Toiv to Ra. So number 1 is going to be the most Toiv, and number 6 is going to be the most Ra. And we'll see an interesting thing, I think. Just give me a thumbs up when you've done it. It's very cute. Got all these little thumbs going like that in them. Quite easy, yeah? People found that easy? Relatively easy? Not so easy? Quite easy. What do you think the chances are that we're all going to have the same order? Just right, you can just send a message out of 10. 10 out of 10, everyone's going to have the same order. So just shoot a quick message. What do you think? 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10. 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10. 6 out of 10. Okay. So it's interesting, isn't it? 8, 9. See, everybody, I mean, everyone knows how cool the chatbot GPT is, yeah? Does everyone know how insanely unbelievable, amazing that thing is? No, it's much unbelievable. And he just couldn't do it at all. He failed completely. What is good and evil? So if we've got such a vague definition of good and evil, saying that it's complex, it's dependent on philosophical, cultural, religious, and ethical perspectives, changes over time, etc., how comes nearly all of us, except for Mrs. Cohen, thought that basically we're all going to get the same, order? Do you hear the question? That it's so vague, yet we're like, okay, so let's see the order. Okay, so I'll tell you the order that I wrote down and see if you agree with me, okay? So number 1 being the most good, I wrote Mother Teresa. Everyone put your hand up, thumb up, just give me a nod or something. Maybe better to see if somebody didn't. Okay, everybody put Mother Teresa. So number 1, that's good. So we all got that wrong. Or maybe not right. The second one I wrote was Bill Gates. Yeah, everyone's nodding. Again, if you didn't write, it's probably better if you didn't write it to put a thumbs down. Okay. Then after that, I wrote Robin Hood. Yeah. Then after that, I wrote Bernie Madoff. Yeah. Oh no. Who did you write, Mrs. Katz?
I hope Bernie Madoff.
Yeah, I said Bernie Madoff. Number 4 is Bernie Madoff.
Sorry, Ted Bundy and then Bernie Madoff.
Okay, yeah. Then number 5. Now number 5, I wrote Ted Bundy. And obviously, because we're all Jewish, we're going to put Adolf Hitler Yamach as number 6. So is there anybody who didn't get that list? I'll just say it again. So there's Mother Teresa, Bill Gates, Robin Hood, Bernie Madoff, Ted Bundy, Yamach Shemoy, Adolf Hitler Yamach Shemoy. Everyone got the same. Did anyone get a different list?
I'm sorry.
Go on, go for it.
I actually had Hitler a second, only because it's a conversation like I've had many times over.
Say again.
Only because I've had this conversation many times over. I put Hitler a second, because
and Bundy the last.
Yes.
Good. We'll discuss that.
Okay.
I agree with you. Maybe we'll talk about that.
All right.
Mrs. Hammy, what were you going to say?
I put for number 2 Robin Hood and number 3 Bill Gates.
Okay, good.
Me too. I had the same order.
Yeah, you don't think like the fact of like stealing from like people, it's kind of like holding up at gunpoint, even if you're going to give it to poor people, it's a little bit like not Beseda.
My thought process was the intentions were good versus Bill Gates, where it's more neutral. Like he wasn't doing it to. Inevitably, it helped people, but Robin Hood was more of like a hero in my mind. But I could see how it could be switched both ways.
So, but isn't this interesting? Don't we all think this is crazily interesting? How that no one can define what good and evil is, but we can take that list of people and basically nail it, everyone together. And we still probably can't articulate right now, but Bezrat Hashem we will. But I've got a question for everybody, okay? Everybody put Mother Teresa first, yeah? And most of us, nearly everyone, put Bill Gates second. But how comes? Because Bill Gates, he basically eradicated malaria from Africa single-handedly. He helped like hundreds of millions of people, literally saved the lives of hundreds of millions of people almost single-handedly. Mother Teresa, on the other hand, don't get me wrong, she probably helped thousands of people, maybe tens of thousands of people, but it was nothing like the level of good that Bill Gates put into the world. But how comes everybody put Mother Teresa above Bill Gates without even a thought?
Because she had the people. She had the other people in mind more than herself. It sounds like
Bill
Bill Gates.
So,
Bill Gates the opposite way.
wait, so I'm not. So you're saying because Mother Teresa had you're basically saying you don't really care about what happens. It's about Lemaister. It's about the
Feeling.
person.
Yeah. Where it's coming from. Yeah.
So now let's discuss this idea of Ted Bundy and Adolf Hitler on the same level. Because this, I think, if you're going to say that Mother Teresa is better than Bill Gates, even though Bill Gates saved hundreds of millions of people and Mother Teresa maybe saved tens of thousands of people, let's say, yeah, then we've got a discussion open now with Ted Bundy and Adolf Hitler. It's horrible to even say these names. But we just discussed, it's not about the actual actions, yeah? So like, for example, I'm sorry to talk about these examples, but just to get this very clear, it's very important. Well, we'll say that in a minute. So basically the way we've ordered it and the way that everybody understands instinctually what is good and evil is how we're going to now translate these words that are going to be foundational in our entire avodas Hashem, in everything that we do as a Jew and as a human being, is that our working definition of good is selfless, and our working definition of evil is selfish. Simple as that. Super simple. And everyone knows it. Everyone knows it. I'm surprised the chatbot didn't know it. It's not cultural. It's not philosophical. It's not religious. Everybody knows that selfish is evil and selfless is good. So now what about the outcome? So what about, just to paint a horrible picture, is some Arab decides to drive his car into some Yidden in Eretz Yisrael. Okay, that's obviously evil. But so let's say now that this guy, he wasn't particularly competent, like most of them anyway, and as he tried to career off the road, something happened and his car hit some thing and it flipped over, and he actually ended up killing a guy with a suicide bomb attached to him who was on his way to commit some kind of crazy atrocity in Eretz Yisrael somewhere. Did that in any way change the actual person? You realize if you plug it in, the first guy is a war criminal and the second guy is a war hero. One guy killed 3 or 4 people and the other guy saved 30 odd people from getting killed. It's an interesting question, yeah? But it's not really, it's very obvious. The guy's as evil. It didn't even matter what happened. That's not part of the equation, actually, what happens. It's to do with what he was intending, his intentions. So the idea of good and evil now, you realize we've completely extracted it from the actual behavior, what happens. So for example, is genocide a good thing?
Depends where it's coming from.
Like when Yeshua came into Eretz Yisrael and was commanded by God to wipe out the 7 Canaanite nations, that is what we call in our language genocide. But that wasn't coming from a selfish place, so like that's actually a good thing. And is building a hospital a good thing? Again, it depends where it's coming from, because if this like billionaire is building a hospital because his other billionaire friend just built like a hospice and he wants to get one up on him, yeah, he couldn't care less about the hospital. He's just got a few $1 billion knocking around, so he thought he would be able to trump his friend by building a hospital. Yeah, that's not particularly good. We might even call that evil. I mean, it's going to have nice ramifications for people, but it's kind of a bit like that that guy driving his car into the suicide bomber. It's not as extreme as that.
How about the marble?
Oh, good. Okay, so what about the marble? Is the marble good or bad? A natural disaster, a forest fire. Good or bad?
I think there's both sides. Whether it's like good or bad, like it depends on the angle we want to take on it. Like for the people who suffer, it's obviously not ideal, so therefore it's not good. But for what it does in terms of regenerating growth for the world, it's not bad. It's like a natural cause.
So it's your mind that needs to strip it into good or bad. Really, it's just what it is. It's not good or bad. It's just what it is. It's a big flood. Now there's what's called pain and pleasure. For some people, it's going to cause pain. For some people, it's going to cause pleasure. And maybe the people who experience pain later on, they'll experience pleasure, and maybe vice versa. But in regards to good or bad, that's a uniquely human concept that we stick on something. So now I've got a question for everybody. In the Mishnah, in Chazal, anyone knows what we refer to predatory animals as? How do you say predatory animal in Hebrew? Not in modern Hebrew, in classical rabbinic Hebrew. It's called a chaya ra. Chaya ra. What's the problem with that? Why doesn't that make any sense? An evil animal. Like a tiger's called an evil animal. And
That's its nature. It's just doing what comes natural.
so what's the difference between a tiger and a cow? Like you just said, it's just the tiger's programmed to eat meat. The cow's programmed to eat grass. So why would you call a tiger Ra? What's the connection? Why is it even? I mean, we feel there's something like it makes sense, but really, a tiger's just doing what it was programmed to do. So why would that be called evil? What's the difference in a tiger and a cow? If a cow was programmed to eat meat, it'd also be scary and eat meat. Everyone's with me?
Well, it's just from our perspective. It's raw.
That's exactly the point, that Chazal are teaching us, when we understand that our definitions of good and evil are selfless and selfish, what's the ultimate act of selfishness? The most selfish thing that one person can do to another.
Murder?
Well, basically, that's correct, but to say like this, I'm going to take the most precious thing that you have for my own selfish purposes. And the most precious thing that we have is our life. So I'm going to kill someone because for whatever personal reason. That's the epitome of Ra. So you're right, an animal can't be called Ra. You can't call it, because an animal's just an animal. It's like a robot. It just does what it's programmed to do. But the very concept of an animal taking the life of another animal so that it can continue to live, Chazal's teaching us what Ra actually means. Everyone's with me? That's the very definition of Ra, that I will take your life so that I can continue to live. So now, what's the person who embodies, what's the trait that we call this person who embodies the trait of Toiv, who's selfless? The person who's become selfless. In English, what would be the word we would use to describe that person?
Righteous?
Righteous.
Murder.
Okay, that's a little bit. The problem with righteous is a bit vague, because some people would call the Rishoyim who came into Eretz Yisrael righteous. What's a more what's the word? A more helpful label.
A
Martyr?
hero?
Hero.
So
It's probably better.
what?
A hero, or someone said a martyr.
A hero, martyr. So it's very simple. The name for a person who's embodied selflessness, meaning that he really appreciates that you exist, he's called humble, or she's called humble. That's a humble person. A humble person isn't a person who's just very he keeps his head down like this and he goes like this, and that's not humble. A humble person means that he really appreciates that you're that you're a Matthias, that you exist. In fact, a really humble person feels that you exist more than he exists, not in like a negative kind of dependent, pathetic way, but in a very real way. You are more real to him than he is to. So I'll just give you the in the Gemara, it describes the Chassid, the Tzaddik, and the Rasha. It's very interesting because it says that the Chassid, the Rasha, it says the whole thing in 6 words. It says Rasha Zarkan, Tzaddik Kavran, Chassid Sarfan. It means like this. The Rasha throws them on the floor, the Tzaddik buries them, and the Chassid burns them. What's it talking about? It's talking about nails, fingernails. The Rasha throws them on the floor. Everyone knows that fingernails, however it works out, are not healthy for pregnant women, whatever. So the Rasha throws them on the floor. The Tzaddik buries them, and the Chassid burns them. How is that teaching us what these 3 categories are? Because the Rasha doesn't care about you. He cares about himself. So he throws them on the floor, and if you tread on them and it causes you a problem, then that's not my problem, that's your problem. The tzaddik cares about you, but he also cares about himself. I'll explain in a minute. So he buries them. The chassid, it says that by burning your nails, I don't know what it means exactly, but by burning your nails, it causes you some kind of nezek. It's damaging to you. I don't know if it means because it's like cremation or for the smell or the smoke or whatever, I don't know. But anyway, it's damaging for you. So by the chassid burning his nails, what he's actually demonstrating is that he cares more about potentially harming you than he does about himself. That's the embodiment of goodness. We call that humble. So then obviously what's the opposite? Is arrogant. So humility and arrogance, they're not like traits like kindness or judgmental, etc. Humility and arrogance, anivas and gaiva, are foundations of a character. Everything else is built on that. So a guy could be kind, but he can be arrogant and kind, meaning he's doing kindness, but it's all about himself. A guy could be kind, or a guy could be strict, but he's humble, so his strictness is all about you. It's not about him at all. You with me? So humility and arrogance are the foundations of our characters. Who are the 2 personalities in the Torah that symbolize humility and arrogance?
Aaron and Moshe.
Moshe Rabbeinu.
Yeah. And his arch enemy Paro. This is really the fight of the Jew, is being freed from arrogance. That's it. Our whole divine service is so much more simple than we originally thought. It's so much more simple. Baruch Hashem.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
A lot of people in this generation not capable of really understanding this because we're lacking like knowing our greatness and knowing who we are. Like I feel like that comes before being able to understand this idea.
So I hear. Can you say a little bit more what you mean by that? Knowing our greatness. What does that mean?
Before we don't understand who we are, how much power we could have in a very good way, we can understand. A lot of people start working on being humble, and then they end up becoming like codependent, and it goes the wrong way.
So that's not that I'm see the I hear this a lot. My response is basically, what is this understanding of who we are? What does that mean when we talk about our power and our chashivas, our value? What are we really referring to? I'm proposing maybe it's a phantom. Maybe it's a phantom that we're chasing after. And really what we should be doing is focusing ourselves outward.
We're so disconnected from our source that we don't even.
But what does that mean? I agree with you. But what does that mean, being disconnected from our source?
We don't, because Hashem is not so real in our lives. We're just living like such materialistic lives.
You're saying it all. What does that mean? So now we're living on a very surface level. That's what you mean by materialistic,
right?
Not
deep.
Yeah. Hmm?
So I don't know. Help me.
So if we're living on an external level, everybody agree that really what you're trying to say is we're all very external.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? What's the difference between external and internal? A person who's a person who is, I don't know the word for it in English. What would you say? If a person's not external, she is, what's the word?
Introverted?
No, not like that at all. I mean, like a guy who's external is showy. He's got the big watch and he's all, he's an external person. Yeah. And then
Living for a higher purpose.
Yeah.
Spiritual?
Spiritual can also be very
Modest.
Sorry?
Modest.
Modest. That's a good. I'll describe it. I don't know the word, but I'll describe the difference. Is a guy, somebody who's living on an external world, in an external way. Everything is fragmented. All of reality is compartmentalized, fragmented, dislocated, disconnected, unrelated, antagonistic. That's called being in a shell. Yeah, there's you, there's him, there's that. That's if you're living in that, if a person's living in that kind of mentality, when he looks at his avodas Hashem, yeah, or she looks at her avodas Hashem, what you end up having is an endless, or just your life, an endless checklist of stuff you have to do. You have to be a good mother. You have to be a good wife. You have to say Tehillim. You have to say your brachas in the morning. You have to make sure food's ready for your husband. If you look at it in a relationship level, yeah, it's a very, very, very helpful way of seeing it. When we look at it as our relationship with our spouse, yeah, I'll say it from my perspective because then it won't be so threatening. So when I look at when I'm thinking about what it means to be a good husband, yeah, let's say I've got to take out the trash. Yeah, I have to pay the mortgage. I have to learn with the kids on Shabbos afternoon. I have to put my socks in the my dirty socks in the washing bin. Yeah, I don't want to tread on any husband's feet here. I have to wash up my plate once I've eaten. Yeah, let's say. So that's 5 different avoiders. That's already, and we could actually, if we sat there for an hour or two, we could come out with many more than 5 different things that we have to do to be a good spouse. Yeah. But when you actually change your focus from the idea of being a good spouse to your husband or to your wife, you realize that when you're taking out the trash, it's not about taking out the trash, it's about your wife. When you're paying the mortgage, it's not about paying a mortgage, it's about your wife. When you're putting your socks in the dirty laundry basket, it's not about socks and dirty laundry basket, it's about your wife. You with me? That when we go inside into the relationship and realize who it is that we're trying to have a relationship with, as opposed to trying to be a certain person, if we can move our perspective from me to them, everything becomes so easy, because it's not these endless different things that I have to deal with that's just so draining. How can someone do all this stuff? It's much too much. This is much too much. Whereas when I change my focus, so it's like, it's not about being a good husband, it's about your wife. It's not about being a good mother, it's about your kids. If you're able to move your focus from me being a good mother to it's just about the kids, then there's only one thing to do now. Or there's only one thing, and that's the children. Oh, in this situation, then I have to deal with this. And in this situation, then my children, the need of my child manifests like this. In this situation, the need of my child manifests like this. In this, it's always about my child. That's exactly what we're talking about. When we can move our focus, what Mrs. Silver was just saying before, is this idea of building ourselves and going to the psychoanalyst and digging deeper and deeper and deeper into, what happened when I was 5 years old and what this and that. I'm not saying there aren't such things as trauma. I'm not saying that at all. That's for sure. But if we can move our perspective from me to Hashem, or from me to my children, or from me to my spouse, then life becomes much more manageable, because we don't end up with this endless checklist of things to do. There just becomes one thing to do. So that's really the avoid of becoming humble. Becoming humble means taking my perspective off of me and shifting my perspective onto others. That doesn't mean that I don't take care of myself, obviously, because if I'm not taking care of myself, then how can I serve others? You can't. So you have to make sure you get enough sleep. You have to make sure that you eat the right foods. You have to make sure that you exercise. You have to make sure that you have time for yourself. But it's not about me. If we can change that perspective, that's really the key to the whole game. That's really the key to the whole game. So we've got all these relationships in our life that we can practice on. It's about my kids. It's not about me. It's not about me being a good mother. It's about my kids. It's got nothing to do with me. If we get all these amazing relationships to practice this on, and then we plug it into the big relationship, which is with Hashem. And then everything, even our relationships then become a part of our relationship with our Creator. Our Creator wants us to have deep, real relationships with our spouses, with our children, with our parents, with our siblings, etc. He wants real relationships. So it all becomes part of Him, and then life becomes incredibly simple. I promise you, it becomes so simple and so pleasurable as well. Not that we're doing it for that reason at all, but that's just that's like a side point. That's a outgrowth of this moving from, and that's the movement of from Ra to Tov. Ra, on we'll finish up now, but on Rosh Hashanah, when we blow the shofar, there's one of the notes. Anyone knows what the teruah, the sound of the teruah is? It's the one that goes, yeah? That's from Lashon Ra, teruah. It's from the same words, Reish Ayin, Ra. It means broken off. It means separated, dislocated, fragmented, in pieces. That's what Ra is. Ra is when you see the world as these disconnected, antagonistic, unrelated pieces. And it's so confusing and overwhelming and just unpleasant. So our avoid is moving from Ra to Tov. Tov is when it all comes together and it's all echad, and life becomes very, very simple. And that's the movement from Paro to Moshe, which is what we call Geula, which is what we're experiencing right now, B'ezrat Hashem. Okay, so we'll hold here. Zat Hashem next week. Any questions?
Thank you so much.
Pleasure. No questions? Great.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you.